Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into a high-stakes detective story that is quite literally hidden right inside your medicine cabinet. You know, we all rely on modern medicine, right? We use it to keep ourselves healthy, to manage chronic conditions, and obviously to save lives in emergencies. But what happens when the pill you take just isn't what it claims to be? Today, we're unpacking the hidden complexities of the global pharmaceutical supply chain, and we're going to take a really close look at how the industry is fighting back against a growing, almost invisible threat: counterfeit drugs.
To really wrap your head around the sheer scale of this threat, consider this highly alarming statistic. According to the World Health Organization, they estimate that over 10% of the entire pharmaceutical supply chain in low and middle-income countries consists of counterfeit drugs. Let that sink in for a second. Over 10%. That means 1 in 10 medications in those regions could be completely fake, substandard, or dangerously compromised. So we're not just talking about some minor logistical hiccup here. This is a massive systemic vulnerability that affects millions of patients worldwide.
And this interconnected vulnerability brings us to Section 1, the counterfeit drug crisis. Now, you might be thinking this is just a distant issue confined to specific regions. But actually, no. It's a massive security threat affecting developed economies as well. It's effectively turning the global pharmaceutical supply chain into a battlefield. Because our supply chains are so incredibly interconnected, a weakness in one part of the world can easily, and I mean easily, introduce risks into another. According to the sustainability accounting standards for healthcare distributors, these unauthorized fakes are terrifyingly diverse. They can range from having deceptive, fake packaging all the way to completely lacking the active ingredient. Even worse, sometimes they contain an excessive quantity of an active ingredient or just the completely wrong chemical altogether. So it literally turns a life-saving medicine into a deadly risk for the patient taking it.
So who exactly is guarding the gate? That brings us to Section 2, the distributor's dilemma.
While drug manufacturers are the ones creating the medicine, it's actually the healthcare distributors who purchase, inventory, and sell these pharmaceutical products to hospitals, pharmacies, and your doctors. They are the vital bridge between the factory and your local pharmacist. So the responsibility of keeping these fakes out of the system falls heavily on their shoulders. And regulators and investors hold them strictly accountable, using really rigorous sustainability and accounting standards, like the SASB standards. Under the Sustainable Industry Classification System, healthcare distributors have very specific, very strict metrics they absolutely must meet to prevent fake products from entering their distribution networks. And let me tell you, the pressure on these distributors is mounting rapidly. They're facing escalating costs and rising regulatory risks as legal authorities worldwide mandate stricter and stricter drug supply chain regulations. Because if they fail to comply, or if mislabeled drugs manage to enter their system, they aren't just facing a bad PR day. They are looking at severe financial consequences, massive regulatory penalties, and a total loss of investor trust. It's a make-or-break situation, for sure. To meet these incredibly aggressive regulations, distributors must deploy what brings us to Section 3, Tech for Traceability. Now, traceability, it sounds a bit like a corporate buzzword, right? But when applied at this massive global scale, it is fascinating. It basically means acting like a relentless detective and tracking every tiny, minuscule detail of a pill's journey. According to industry standards, this means capturing identifying information like the exact chemical composition, the specific supplier, the precise production date and location, and literally the entire processing history, from sourcing the raw materials all the way to retail. To pull this off, distributors utilize a massive technological arsenal to make that level of tracking a reality for millions of units globally. We are talking about high-tech solutions like radio frequency identification or RFID tagging and highly advanced barcode systems. But, it's not all just tech. It also includes really rigorous operational methods like industry audit sharing programs, tight coordination with law enforcement, and sometimes simply purchasing directly from the manufacturer whenever possible to cut out the middlemen where fakes tend to slip in. But tracking the physical pills, that's really only half the battle. Which brings us to Section 4, Supplier Due Diligence. This requires a rigorous, multi-step due diligence process, because before a single medical device or drug product is ever purchased, distributors have to identify, screen, and fully approve their suppliers. Think about it. You can have the absolute best barcodes in the world, but if your supplier is corrupt, the whole system fails. Securing the source involves comprehensive questionnaires, enforcing strict codes of conduct, conducting physical inspections, and requiring third-party certifications for good manufacturing practices and quality management systems. It is incredibly thorough.
And what's truly fascinating here is how these standards are actively evolving. Beyond your traditional quality and manufacturing checks, distributors are increasingly incorporating environmental, social, and governance, or ESG, issues right into their supplier screening requirements. Basically, this means they're evaluating a supplier's broader operational footprint as a key indicator of their overall reliability. If they're trustworthy with ESG, they're more likely to be trustworthy handling life-saving medications. But despite this incredible net of security, all these traceability technologies, and the intense supplier vetting, we have to ask the most critical, uncomfortable question. What happens if a highly sophisticated counterfeit still manages to slip through all these defenses and actually enters the market? Well, when the unthinkable happens, hesitation costs lives. This brings us to Section 5, sounding the alarm. Because the healthcare supply chain is so vast, distributors absolutely must have a rapid, established process for alerting their entire network. And we're not just talking about calling a few business partners. This involves alerting patients, physicians, other suppliers, wholesalers, retailers, and hospitals to any potential or known risks associated with counterfeit products. That communication has to be virtually instantaneous and incredibly widespread. And they can't just send out a generic warning. The SASB standards strictly mandate that distributors must provide specific, recommended actions for all these parties to minimize the risks. On top of that, they must have highly robust mechanisms already in place to immediately recall the product. They have to be able to yank it off pharmacy shelves and out of hospital supply rooms before it can ever reach a patient. So, these corporate standards, the RFID tags, the intense supplier audits, and those rapid recall networks that secure our pharmaceutical supply chain, they're largely invisible to us as everyday consumers. But they are an absolutely vital shield working around the clock to protect our health and survival from the very real, very dangerous threat of counterfeit drugs. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today, and I want to leave you with this thought. The next time you open a medicine bottle, will you see just a pill? Or will you see the massive global security operation designed to keep it safe?